Bullies target a quiet newcomer. Huge mistake. He's a hidden force they'll never see coming. What would you do if you were humiliated every day, hiding a secret that could flip the script? And what if those who mocked you were about to face the most brutal wake-up call of their lives? This is the story of Liam, a boy who rolls into the sleepy town of Havenwood and instantly becomes the punching bag for the school's toughest crew. What they don't realize is they've picked the wrong fight. What starts as typical bullying spirals into a jaw-dropping reckoning no one could predict. Buckle up for a wild ride of vengeance, revelation, and a twist that'll leave you stunned. By the third day, Ethan had Liam pegged. The new kid's silence wasn't just annoying, it was personal. Ethan didn't like loose ends, and Liam, with his blank stares and hunched shoulders, was a puzzle he intended to crack. The perfect chance came at lunch. The Havenwood High cafeteria was a noisy mess of clattering trays and shouted conversations, the air thick with the smell of greasy pizza and spilled soda. Liam sat alone at a corner table, his hoodie up, picking at a sandwich with zero enthusiasm. It was like he'd built an invisible wall around himself, and that only made him a bigger target. Ethan strutted over, Carter and the others trailing behind like a pack of wolves. He stopped right in front of Liam's table and slammed his hand down hard, making the tray jump and the plastic fork clatter to the floor. "Hey, mute," Ethan said, his voice loud enough to turn heads. "What's your deal? Too good to talk to us?" Liam didn't even flinch. He lifted his eyes slowly, meeting Ethan's glare for a split second before dropping them back to his food. He took another bite, chewing deliberately like Ethan wasn't even there. Carter stepped up, leaning in close. "What, you deaf too? Or just dumb?" Nick and Tyler snickered, egging it on, while a few nearby kids watched, half curious, half scared. The room quieted a little, everyone waiting for the new kid to do something, anything. But Liam didn't. He just kept eating, his movements calm, almost mechanical. Ethan's smirk faltered. He'd expected a stutter, a flinch, maybe a weak comeback. Not this. "Look at him," Carter said, loud and mocking. "Guy's a statue. Bet he's scared stiff." The laughter from the crew was sharp, cutting through the hum of the cafeteria. Liam finished his sandwich, wiped his hands on a napkin, and stood up. He grabbed his tray, stepped around Ethan without a word, and headed for the trash cans. The whole place watched him go, a mix of shock and amusement rippling through the crowd. Ethan's face darkened. "He's screwing with us," he muttered to Carter as Liam disappeared through the swinging doors. "Thinks he can just walk away? Nah, he's gonna learn." Carter cracked his knuckles, grinning. "Let's make it fun." That was it. Liam was in their sights now, and Ethan didn't back down from a challenge. He wanted a reaction, and he'd get it one way or another. The new kid's silence wasn't just defiance, it was a middle finger, and Ethan wasn't about to let it slide. It started small but deliberate. In the hallways, Ethan would accidentally shoulder-check Liam, hard enough to make him stumble, but not enough to draw a teacher's eye. Liam never said a thing, just straightened up and kept walking, his face blank. Once, Carter swiped Liam's backpack off his shoulder as he passed, letting it hit the floor with a thud. Books and pencils spilled out, and Carter kicked one down the hall for good measure. "Oops," he said, smirking. Liam bent down, gathered his stuff, and moved on, his gray eyes fixed ahead like nothing happened. It drove Ethan nuts. Most kids would have snapped by now, yelled, shoved back, something. Not Liam. The next day it escalated. Liam was at his locker when Ethan sauntered over, leaned against the wall, and flicked Liam's math book out of his hands. It hit the ground, pages splaying open. "You dropped something, mute?" Ethan taunted, crossing his arms. Nick and Tyler hovered nearby, chuckling. Liam crouched, picked up the book, and dusted it off, his movements slow and precise. He didn't look at Ethan, didn't speak, just shut his locker and walked away. Ethan's jaw tightened. "This guy's begging for it," he said to Carter, who nodded eagerly. "We'll break him." By the end of the week it was a routine. They'd bump him in the halls, knock his stuff around, call him mute or loser loud enough for everyone to hear. Each time Liam took it without a word. He'd fix his bag, pick up his books, and keep moving, his hoodie pulled tight like a shield. But Ethan wasn't satisfied. The lack of fight, the way Liam just absorbed it all, it gnawed at him. "He's not getting off this easy," Ethan told the crew after school, his voice low and hard. "We're gonna teach him who runs this place." Carter grinned, already picturing it. Liam might have thought he could stay invisible, but Ethan was done waiting. The game was on, and it was about to get rough. Ethan wasn't the type to let things fizzle out. Liam's stubborn silence wasn't just a challenge anymore, it was an insult, and Ethan's patience was wearing thin. By the second week, he and Carter turned up the heat, determined to make the new kid crack. It wasn't enough to bump him in the halls or knock his books around. They wanted to see him squirm, to wipe that blank look off his face. Havenwood High became their playground, and Liam was the main attraction in a game that was about to get ugly. It started in English class one rainy Tuesday. Liam was at his usual spot in the back, head down over a notebook, scribbling something with a dull pencil. Ethan swaggered in late, Carter right behind him, and made a beeline for Liam's desk. Without a word, Ethan snatched the notebook out of Liam's hands, holding it up like a trophy. "What's this, Mute? Your diary?" he said, loud enough for the whole class to hear. Before Liam could reach for it, Ethan ripped a page out, the sound of tearing paper slicing through the room. Carter laughed, grabbing another page and shredding it into strips. "Guess you don't need this crap," Ethan sneered, tossing the mangled notebook back onto Liam's desk. Bits of paper fluttered to the floor like confetti. The class went dead quiet. A few kids stared wide-eyed, others smirked or looked away. Liam didn't move at first. Just sat there, hands flat on the desk, staring at the mess. Then, slowly he bent down, picking up the torn pages one by one. His face stayed blank, but his fingers tightened around the paper, crumpling it slightly. Ethan leaned in, grinning. "What's wrong? Gonna cry about it?" Carter clapped Ethan on the shoulder, adding, "Maybe he'll write us a thank you note." The room erupted in nervous laughter, but Liam didn't respond. He stuffed the ruined notebook into his bag and went back to staring out the window like the whole thing never happened. That wasn't the end of it. The next day they hit him again, this time in the cafeteria. Liam had just sat down with his tray when Carter strolled over, a water bottle in hand. "Hey, Mute, you look thirsty," he said, unscrewing the cap. Before Liam could react, Carter dumped the whole thing onto his chair, soaking the seat and splashing Liam's jeans. Ethan, standing a few feet away, burst out laughing. "Oops, my bad," Carter said, not even pretending to mean it. Liam stood up fast, water dripping off him, and grabbed a napkin to wipe his pants. The cafeteria buzzed with whispers and giggles, heads turning to watch. He didn't say a word, just cleaned up, sat back down on the wet chair and started eating again, his jaw tight. Mrs. Harris, the English teacher, was there that day, standing by the lunch line with a clipboard. She saw it all, Carter with the bottle, Ethan egging him on, Liam dripping wet. But she didn't move. She just shook her head slightly, lips pursed, and went back to checking names off her list. No warning, no detention, nothing. The unfairness of it hung in the air like a bad smell. A couple of kids nearby muttered under their breath, but no one spoke up. Ethan caught Mrs. Harris's eye and grinned, knowing he'd gotten away with it. Liam saw it too. His head tilted just enough to glance at her, then back to his food. His hands gripped his fork a little harder, knuckles whitening. The attacks kept coming. They scratched insults into his locker, freak loser, Mute, deep enough to scar the metal. They'd trip him in the halls, sending his books skidding across the floor, then laugh as he picked them up. One afternoon, Carter accidentally dumped Liam's lunch tray into the trash as he walked by, leaving him with nothing to eat. Each time Liam stayed quiet, rebuilding his little world in silence. But something was shifting. His gray eyes, once flat and empty, started to flicker. Tiny sparks of something dark, something tense, like a fire smoldering under damp wood. He'd catch Ethan's gaze for a second longer than before, and there was a weight to it now. A warning Ethan didn't catch. Ethan didn't care, he was too caught up in the rush of it all. "He's breaking," he told Carter after the lunch tray stunt, smirking as they watched Liam walk away. "He's just too chicken shit to show it," Carter nodded, cracking his neck. "Let's push harder." They didn't see the tension building in Liam's shoulders, the way his steps slowed, or how his hands curled into fists before relaxing again. To them, he was still a punching bag, a nobody who'd fold eventually. But that fire in his eyes wasn't fear. It was something else, something they'd regret waking up. Liam wasn't just taking it anymore. He was waiting. The bell rang at 3:15 and Havenwood High emptied out fast. Kids spilled into the parking lot, laughing and shouting, their voices fading as they scattered toward home or the diner downtown. Liam didn't linger. He slung his backpack over one shoulder and headed down a quiet side street that cut through an overgrown lot, the shortest path to his place above the hardware store. The air was cool, the sky gray with late afternoon clouds, and the crunch of gravel under his sneakers was the only sound. He kept his head down, hoodie up, just another day of blending into the background. Or so he thought. He didn't hear them at first, not until the footsteps grew loud and uneven behind him. 4 sets, heavy and deliberate, closing in fast. Liam slowed, his shoulders tensing, but he didn't turn around. He didn't need to. Ethan's voice cut through the stillness like a blade. "Where you going, mute?" it taunted, dripping with venom. Liam stopped, letting out a slow breath, and finally glanced back. There they were. Ethan, Carter, Nick, and Tyler spread out across the narrow street like a wall. Ethan stood front and center, arms crossed, a smirk twisting his lips. Carter cracked his knuckles, his bulk looming large. Nick and Tyler hung back, grinning like they were in on some big joke. Liam adjusted his bag, his gray eyes flicking over them one by one. "Leave me alone," he said, his voice low but steady, the first words he'd spoken to them in weeks. Ethan laughed, a sharp barking sound that echoed off the empty houses nearby. "Oh, he talks now," he said, stepping closer. "Too late for that, freak. You don't get to play tough after ducking us all this time." Carter moved up beside Ethan, rolling his shoulders like a boxer prepping for a fight. "Should have opened your mouth sooner," he growled. "Now you're gonna pay." Before Liam could respond, Carter lunged, slamming a meaty fist into his shoulder. The blow knocked Liam sideways, his bag slipping down his arm, but he caught himself quick, planting his feet. Pain flared through his arm, sharp and hot, but his face didn't change. No wince, no gasp. Ethan clapped his hands, delighted. "That's a start. Come on, mute, let's see some tears." He circled closer, eyes gleaming. "Here's the deal. Get on your knees, say you're sorry, and maybe we'll let you crawl home. Sound good?" Nick and Tyler hooted, egging it on, their laughter grating against the quiet. Liam straightened, rubbing his shoulder with one hand. His hoodie had slipped back, showing more of his face, pale, sharp, and unreadable. "I said leave me alone," he repeated, slower this time, each word clipped. Ethan's grin vanished. "Wrong answer," he snapped, nodding at Carter. "Make him." Carter didn't hesitate. He swung again, aiming for Liam's chest, but this time Liam moved. He sidestepped, quick as a shadow, and Carter's fist hit empty air. For a second, everyone froze, Ethan's crew staring confused as Liam stood there, calm and still. Then it happened. Carter roared, charging forward with another wild punch, but Liam didn't dodge again. He ducked low, pivoted, and drove his fist up into Carter's gut, a single, precise strike that landed like a hammer. Carter gasped, a choked wheeze escaping his lips as he doubled over, dropping to his knees on the gravel. His hands clutched his stomach, eyes wide with shock, and he crumpled sideways, groaning. It took maybe 2 seconds, start to finish, and the street went dead silent. Nick and Tyler's jaws dropped. Ethan blinked, his smirk gone, replaced by a flicker of panic. "What the hell?" Ethan started, but he didn't finish. He rushed Liam, swinging a sloppy right hook, all fury and no aim. Liam caught his arm mid-swing, twisting it behind Ethan's back in one fluid motion. Ethan yelped, stumbling forward as Liam tightened the hold, locking his wrist at an angle. The next morning, Havenwood High buzzed with whispers. Word of the fight had spread like wildfire. Ethan's crew taken down by the quiet new kid on a back street after school. By lunch, it was all anyone could talk about. Ethan and Carter showed up with bruised egos and a story to spin. They stormed into the principal's office, Ethan's voice loud enough to leak through the door. "He jumped us out of nowhere, psycho freak!" Carter nodded, clutching his stomach like it still hurt, demanding Liam get expelled. The principal, Mr. Grayson, listened with a frown, but he didn't buy it outright. Something didn't add up. Liam got called in an hour later. He walked into the office, hoodie up, hands in his pockets, same blank look he always wore. Mr. Grayson leaned forward, elbows on his desk. "What happened yesterday, son?" he asked, voice stern but curious. Liam didn't sit. He stood there, eyes fixed on the floor, and after a long pause he spoke. "They came at me. I defended myself." His tone was flat, no plea, no panic, just fact. Then he added, quieter, "I didn't want to hurt anyone. I've been trying not to." Grayson raised an eyebrow. "Trying not to? What's that mean?" Liam hesitated, then pulled back his sleeve, revealing a faint scar snaking up his forearm, jagged, old, like a fight gone wrong. "I used to box," he said. "Junior leagues, back in my old town. Got banned 2 years ago. Put a kid in the hospital. Too much force." His voice dipped, almost a whisper. I came here to start over, keep my head down. They wouldn't let me. Grayson sat back, stunned. The room went quiet, the weight of it sinking in. Liam wasn't just some scrawny kid. He was a trained fighter, holding himself on a leash, and Ethan's crew had snapped it. Ethan and Carter's story fell apart fast. A grainy security camera from a nearby gas station had caught the whole thing. Carter's first punch, Ethan's taunts, Liam's swift counterattack. The footage hit Grayson's desk by noon, and the tide turned. Ethan and Carter got slapped with a week suspension. Their parents called in for a long, heated meeting. Nick and Tyler got off lighter. Detention. But the damage was done. The kings of Havenwood High were grounded, their reputations shredded. Liam didn't stick around to see it play out. The next day, his desk in homeroom sat empty. Mrs. Harris found a folded note tucked under her gradebook. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to win, just wanted to be left alone. I'm gone now." No signature, but the tight, slanted handwriting was unmistakably his. By lunch, word got around. Liam and his mom had cleared out of the apartment overnight. No forwarding address, no goodbyes. The hardware store owner shrugged when asked. They paid cash, kept to themselves. Didn't see him leave. Ethan and Carter came back after their suspension, heads low, avoiding the stares. The cafeteria didn't cheer for them anymore, it smirked. Liam's ghost hung over the school, a quiet kid who'd flipped their world upside down and vanished. No one knew where he went. Some said he'd moved to another small town, chasing that peace he never found here. Others figured he'd gone back to fighting, somewhere far off, under a different name. The truth stayed a mystery, a loose thread in Havenwood's story. All that lingered was his note, those words echoing, "I didn't want to win, just wanted to be left alone." And with that, Liam was gone. Liam's story leaves us with a raw truth. Strength isn't always loud, and silence isn't weakness. Ethan and his crew saw a target in Liam's quiet, but they missed the fire beneath it, a reminder that judging too quick can backfire hard. It's a lesson for life. Don't underestimate people, and don't push someone past their breaking point, because you might not like what comes next. Liam didn't want to fight, just peace. And that's the kicker. Sometimes the strongest choice is walking away, not swinging back. In our own lives, it's worth pausing before we judge or provoke. You never know who's holding back a storm. Thanks for sticking with this wild ride. What do you think? Could you stay silent like Liam, or would you snap sooner? Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories that twist and turn.